It's nearly Valentine's Day, and while Twisted Wonderland is not an otome or romantic game per se, if Lilia is to be believed, then there are romances blooming on campus. However, we tragically never get to find out who's paired with who, so some members of the Twist community have taken it upon themselves to get some ships sailing. And some of those ships have wild names, like Applejack's, which is also, coincidentally, a cereal, not sponsored. Since I'm not familiar with the shipping space at all, I've asked y'all to share the wackiest, wildest pair names you could think of for me to guess in a video, and you did not disappoint. So today, in the spirit of love, I'm going to do my best to guess the proper pairings for 25 of these silly ships. And I once again must ask for your support because I have had a really hard time trying to look these up after the fact to figure out who they actually represent. So, you're just gonna have to tell me how well I did. But first up, I thought it would be appropriate to start with the aforementioned Applejacks, as it's probably one of the most straightforward in this bunch. While it is technically a food, and that's the most popular Google result for this term, I have it on good authority that any names that include apple also include apple, for reasons I'm sure I don't have to explain. So I know at the very least this is a ship that involves apple, but for the Jack's part, it's also rather convenient that we have a character in Twisted Wonderland whose name is eerily similar, and that's Jack. The most logical conclusion I could come to for Applejacks is that this is a ship name for Apple and Jack. So that's what I'm going to go with here. Congratulations to Apple and Jack on your potentially blossoming romance. Next up, we have Gold+Silver, which at face value would include the Twist character who shares the same name as one of the aforementioned metals, silver. But I also do wonder if this might be a red herring and that this ship might more so mean opposites, like the sunshiny gold and the moonlit silver, which could also then still include Diasomnia silver, but it could also include a lot of other folks too. Is this a grumpy ex-sunshine ship, or am I overthinking things? I don't know, but I suppose the most golden character I can think of in all of Twist is Kaleem. Not only is he the embodiment of sunshine, but he also has many metric tons of actual 24 karat gold. So he's gotta be the gold referenced here. And there are a variety of grumpy characters that could fit the silver motif if this is what this ship is referencing. But I have no idea which could fit the bill the best, so I'm just going to go with actual silver. So my final decision for Gold+Silver is Kaleem and Silver. Congratulations on being another potential romantic pairing. Now, this one really threw me for a loop when I first heard it, because Florida is a US state, so how could it possibly also represent the budding love of two youngsters? Apparently it does, and my best guess is that it involves Floyd somehow. Florida starts with an F, kinda sounds like Floyd, and if any of the Twist cast were to be a Florida man, it would be Floyd. So I think I've got at least that going for me here. The trickier part is the Rita, because I'm not sure if it's referencing Riddle or Edia or both. I'm sure there are poly ships out there. I'm 100% sure that they exist, but I'm not in the space, so I don't know if there are defining characteristics or naming conventions that those sorts of ships tend to follow, so I have no idea if this is a poly ship or not. If it is, then I think it's a Floyd, Riddle, and Edia ship because the mashup of the names would conceivably create Florida. But if it's not a poly ship, then I think it's more logical based off of the name for this to be a Floyd and Edia ship. So for the sake of my slide formatting, I'm going to leave these two lovebirds here and call it a day. So congratulations, best of luck to you. Next up is Double Hearts, a very fun name for some very fun fellows. I'm assuming this is a Heartsable ship, so it involves folks from Heartsable, given that Hearts is in the name. And I think it would be logical to maybe assume that this is an Ace and Riddle ship, since they represent the heart suit respectively. But I'm also unsure if that's too obvious of a connection yet again. This could be a Deuce Riddle or Deuce Ace ship, given that Deuce means 2 and Riddle and Ace represent hearts. Maybe this is a Cater ship, since Cater can make multiples of himself. Or maybe this is a Tray ship, since his special magic doodle suit kinda sounds a little bit like Double. Okay, those last two were a bit of a stretch, a little too much, but I do think that Deuce could work here very well. And despite my overthinking, though, I'm going to go with Ace and Riddle as my final answer for this ship. It may be an obvious choice, but I think it makes the most sense given the name, because those two together, you've got double the hearts, and the name is Double Hearts, so there you go. Congratulations, you two. Now, Applejuice, on the other hand, is a beverage, but it is also a ship that I absolutely know because I know that apples represent apple. Learned that. Very fancy. Very proud of myself. And I know that juice sounds like deuce. So this is an open and shut case. It has to be apple and deuce. There is no one else on campus that could match this vibe. None whatsoever. So these two are getting paired up here. So congrats to our freshman duo for being adorable Applejuice buddies. Then we have a Cherry Cauldron. We have a cherry. We have a cauldron. Ta-da! Cherry Cauldron. This is a wonderful suggestion. I kind of like this name a lot, and I threw it in here partially for the free points because I would be so disappointed if I got this one wrong. Ace loves cherries, and Deuce loves cauldrons. And if you take these two elements, set them over a fire, and add in some sugar, you'll get a lovely fruity jam reduction that you can spread on toast, cakes, waffles, pancakes, and more. Plus, it's especially wonderful that this tasty treat is being made with love by these two lovebirds. Or that would be my hope given this ship. So Cherry Cauldron is going to Ace and Deuce. Congrats, you two. Next is Bow and Arrow, and I'm struggling with this one quite a bit. I get that the bow is probably referencing Rook, given that he has many bows, but who is the arrow? Does the arrow represent someone who is being hunted, like Leona? Or does it represent someone Rook works with to accomplish his goals, like Bill? Or is the arrow just an arrow? Is this just a ship between Rook and the concept of hunting? Because this boy is down bad for a good hunt. Oh, how it makes his heart flutter. And it doesn't really matter who the query is either. Jade, captivating. Leona, exhilarating. Vil, oh. The more I think about the ship, the more I think it's just a Rook X anyone and everyone he sets in his sights. The arrow, therefore, is not a specific person, but it is every person that Rook has wished to or wishes to hunt, and I feel like that makes the most sense to me. So congrats to Rook for not only being the biggest flirt in all of Twisted Wonderland, but having the biggest pool of potential romantic partners. Go get 'em, just don't hurt 'em. Please and thank you. Now then, we've got cat plus lizard, and I absolutely love that we got a platonic ship in this list because, as everyone knows, Lucius is a cat and Train is secretly a reptilian. So this is clearly a platonic relationship between the reptile man and his best friend. There's no way this ship could ever possibly reference two members of the main cast that also happen to be a cat and a reptile of sorts. No, not at all. Does it even really matter that the cat individual in that pairing often calls the reptile individual a lizard? Yeah, I suppose it does. This is definitely a Leona Malleus ship, although I do think it would be hilarious for Train to secretly be some sort of reptile beastman or fae individual, unrealistic as that is. But you know what? Doesn't really matter. Cat plus lizard is Leona and Malleus. There you go. Have fun, guys. Now, back to our already existing in media, but also somehow a twist ship, we've got Beauty and the Beastie, which is open to many interpretations. We could have this be a Pomfiore individual paired up with a Savannah individual, which results in 9 unique pairs. Or this could be a Vargas and Corel ship, since Vargas is Gaston adjacent and Corel is Beauty adjacent. So we've got 10 total combinations to decode, and after crunching the numbers for longer than I probably should have, I am no closer to an answer for this one. I think because of the movie connection, the most logical choice I could make is Vargas and Cruel, because Vargas has such strong ties to the concept of Beauty and the Beast, and I don't think anyone else on the staff fits the beauty piece as well as Cruel, since Belle was also as intelligent as she was beautiful. So I feel like they're the most natural fit for this particular shoe. So congrats to Vargas and Cruel for being my pick for Beauty and the Beastie, although I have high doubts that they are the actual pairing that was intended with this ship name, but that's what I'm going with, so there you have it. We've also got Wolf Croc, which sounds like such a fun band or superhero name. It's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's Wolf Croc. When I first heard this ship name, I immediately thought of one of those Croc shoes that has like a fuzzy interior lining, and I was very confused, but also kind of delighted. However, upon further review, I think this ship is also rather obvious, where the wolf would be Jack, for reasons, and the Croc would, of course, be Sebek, for those same reasons. Would these two also form a band or superhero troupe with the name Wolf Croc? Unlikely, unless all the songs could be about Malleus, but then again, I don't know if Jack would sign on for that, so I'm just gonna settle for them being potential lovers here. So let's give it up for Wolf Croc, our lovely, muscly duo. The next one is a little confusing, but in a delightful way, because Sea Snake is not only a ship name, apparently, but an animal and a nickname for Jamil based off of that animal. Because of this connection, I have to assume that Jamil is part of the ship, but I'm not sure if Floyd, Jade, or Azul represent the sea, because this again could be a red herring where they're using Floyd's nickname, but really it's just talking about the sea and the snake versus the sea snake. I'm struggling, guys. I guess because of the nickname, Floyd is the most logical person to be paired with Jamil, but it is very obvious, and I suppose that's the point of these types of things, in a way. But it's so obvious, it's very suspicious to me. So I'm gonna stick with it, but I don't know. All right, Floyd and Jamil are Sea Snake. That's it. That's my final answer. Lock it in. All right, so Wild Beauty was also an extremely difficult name for me to puzzle out. It's the same problem as before, where I think it could be referring to anyone in Pomfiore paired with anyone from Savannah Claw. I guess I can exclude Apple since his ship names seem to center around apples more often than not, but that still means there are 6 other possible pairings that could be happening here, and that doesn't really help. But between Rook and Vil, I'd say Rook is a bit more wild in a way, given his huntsman nature, than Vil is. So I'm gonna place Vil on the beauty side of this one. And while I do think that Rook is a little wild, he's not wild enough to go on the other side. So now I have to decide on who in Savannah Claw is the wildest. Jack is too much of a goody two-shoes to be wild, although his special magic is Unleash the Beast, which... Oh no, does that mean that Jack was part of the other ship? Well, it's too late for that now. I gotta focus on this one. Ruggy. Hey, Ruggy. Ruggy's kind of wild, but I feel like that was more in his youth versus now. He's not terribly wild because he has to get part-time jobs. You can't be too loosey-goosey with that, which now leaves Leona. And he was part of the original Fairy Gala because of the wild aesthetic that he has, apparently. I believe that was how they justified his involvement in that one. So I'm going based off of that to put Leona on the other side of this pairing, because if his aesthetic beauty was wild, I feel like that's something that Vil would appreciate for them to get together somehow. So I am saying that Wild Beauty is Leona and Vil. So congrats to them. Okay, well, this next one I know has to be a poly ship or a love triangle, but either way, there are 3 folks in Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest. My initial thought is that Ace and Deuce need to be included since they share one collective brain cell, but they also tend to share that brain cell with Grim, who I don't think gets shipped with any of the human characters romantically. So this could be a polyplatonic ship, which would then obviously be Ace, Deuce, and Grim. I don't think there's any other people that you could put in those spots to fill this particular need. But if it is romantic, neither Jack nor Apple seem to work for the dumb aspect, neither does Ortho out of the quote-unquote freshman group. And I don't think any of the upperclassmen would fit either. There is one person who I could see kind of fitting in here, and that's Sebek. Not because he's dumb, but because he's very persistent in all that he does, so I can see him trying to help Ace and Deuce not be dumb, which one could consider a dumb thing to do. So then he would get roped into their schemes, and therefore the trio would become the trifecta of Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest. But that feels a little cheap. It doesn't feel that solid to me. So I'm gonna say that this is a platonic poly ship with Ace, Deuce, and Grim. So congrats, guys, on being Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest. Okay, married couple. This can go so many ways with so many people because there are so many pairs I can see acting like a married couple. You got Rook and Vil, Ace and Deuce, Trait and Riddle, Crowley and Corell, although they give off more of a divorced vibe than a married vibe, but that can only come after marriage, so, you know. But the list goes on and on, so I'm not going to be elaborating anymore because I'll probably be listing all of the characters in Twisted Wonderland. I think I'm just gonna have to pick a pair to roll with. So I guess the people that give me the biggest married energy vibe are Rook and Vil, because they feel like the most parental pairing of the groups, with Apple being their child. So Rook and Vil are going to be my picks for married couple. Congratulations, guys. Alrighty, we have cats, not related at all to the musical, or so I am told. Which means that this ship in particular, can only mean one thing. Grim and Lucius. They are both cats, or at least part cat or cat adjacent, and we know that they do tussle from time to time. So perhaps this eventually blossomed into love. A little enemies to lovers moment. Maybe. Possibly. That's what I'm assuming. So that's what I think the cat's ship is. I feel like there's nothing else to really talk about here. It's just Grim and Lucius. Cat and cat adjacent. So moving on. Next up is Lionfish, which has to include Leona since he is a lion. But who? Who could be the fish? Is it Floyd again? Or Jade? Or perhaps Azul? How is a girl to decide? These are very difficult, guys. Delightfully so. Since Lionfish is not Floyd's nickname for Leona, I'm going to exclude him off of the assumption that the other ones that were more, or like the other one that was more related to that was that, which then just leaves Jade and Azul. So who amongst those two is going to be stealing Leona's heart? I mean, Azul did make a contract with him at one point, and he's also a fellow house warden, so there's ample opportunity for them to interact with that side of things. However, Jade is also a subtle yet terrifying force that I can see Leona being interested in for the benefits, and that street would end up going both ways should they eventually end up together. Well, since Leona calls Azul a cephalopunk and is well aware of him being an octopus in particular, although I'm sure he's also aware of the eels being eels, I'm going to assume that Lionfish is a Jade and Leona ship, because I feel like we'd get a little bit more creative with the octopus angle if it was with Azul. So congrats to Leona and Jade for being the Lionfish pairing. Now, Braincell has to be Ace and Deuce. There is no other way it can be anyone else. They share that singular brain cell, and boy oh boy do they use it when they have it. However, when they don't, it is quite a time. I know them very well as the Braincell boys. That's been my nickname for them. So I think that this ship name in particular absolutely has to be those two. I cannot see it being anything else. So congratulations to Ace and Deuce for being the Braincell ship. Ooh, dragon tales, nothing like some dragon tales or something along those lines. Now, with the name like Dragon Tales, one can only assume that Malleus is somehow involved because he is a dragon that does indeed have a tail. But is the Dragon Tales plural referencing another dragon? Because there's only one other dragon that we know of for sure, and if this were like a familial ship, then I suppose that could work. But I'm working with the assumption here that these were suggested with a 99% romantic rate, and we've already had a couple platonic ones. So thinking in a romantic sense instead, I have to kind of look at who else has a tail. I mean, technically the eels have tails of a sort, and all of the Savannah Claw guys have tails, but I don't have much else to go off of. If we count the Diasomnia Halloween outfits, then technically all of the Diasomnia kiddos had tails too, which means that the pool has expanded, and I'm having a very tricky time deciding on who of all of these multiple people would end up with Malleus. There's nothing else for me to go off of besides Dragon and Tail, and I don't really know where to go from here. So I think it would be cute, to go with the Halloween angle, since I think that might be a bit more fun. And then that would technically be like a dragon and a long tail, and they're more related than, like, say, a lion and a dragon, of which we've already had a pairing in this list. So with that, I'm going to say that this is a Malleus Sebek ship, and that's my final answer. So congrats on you two for being the Dragon Tales duo. Next up, we have Cronut, which is a very fun name that I originally, when I heard it, ascribed to the everyone but Deuce XDia ship that someone else so lovingly crafted. But I was told that this was not the name for that ship specifically, so I gotta dig a little deeper into White Rabbit Fest to try to figure this one out. We have 4 of the main boys in that hometown event: Apple, Silver, Ortho, and of course Deuce. But I don't remember off the top of my head if any one of them specifically enjoyed the Cronuts more than the others. Ortho can't actually eat, so I guess that rules him out, and Grim eats everything in existence, so he's not the best metric either. So between Apple, Deuce, and Silver, I feel like since this is a direct reference to the Deuce hometown event, that Cronut has to involve him in some way. So he's going to be the first of the pair. So now with only Silver and Apple left, I have no idea how to differentiate them. I mean, Apple does like sweet things like pancake balls and apple pie, but Silver's not exactly opposed to eating sweets either. Given what Lilia has done to his palate, I'm sure he is not opposed to eating many foods. So picking between them, even though we had an Apple ship before, I'm still gonna go with Apple here. He stands out to me a bit more where the sweets are concerned because of the Harvesting event, which means that Deuce and Apple are claiming another ship for themselves, or at least I'm claiming it for them. But either way, congratulations yet again. Now we have Golden Fox, which immediately reminded me of the term Silver Fox, which usually describes a generically attractive older man, and to that end, I think this ship involves Train in some way. I think we can all agree that he is the silveriest fox in the Twist cast, and since that's what's coming to my mind, I'm involving him. The tricky part comes with that gold bit, but I actually have an idea for this one. I wonder if that could be referencing Ernesto. He's certainly got a sunshiny sales persona, and his lovely ginger hair can be seen as golden in a way. And in that case, oh wait, we have another gold and silver duo, don't we? But now it's with foxes. So congrats to Train and Ernesto for together being the golden foxes. I feel like we've had to have a U ship at some point in this list. So next up we have Beauty and the Shrimp, which is still kind of an open for interpretation name in a way, because this could be any of the aforementioned beautiful characters from the previous beauty considerations. But I think given my logic in those, this too would have to be Vil. He is the fairest of all. Unless this is a Nej ship, I completely forgot about him. He technically is also beautiful, and technically his beauty outshines Vil in the court of public opinion. So maybe this is a Nej and U ship. Oh, how exciting. Unfortunately for Vil, I'm going to be handing this one to Nej. So congratulations to you and Nej. Next up is Heartshackle, which I believe is another U ship. The shackle part must be referencing Ramshackle, although that could also involve the ghosts, I suppose. But since they're more like uncles and hearts are also involved, that would make more sense as like a family ship. However, again, I feel like the intention of what was suggested was more on the romantic side of things. So do I think this is referencing Riddle or Ace? This ship was certainly talked about before during a live stream. I just can't for the life of me remember which of those two it was about. And I have the strangest feeling that it was somehow Ace. Though, so I'm just gonna go with him. We love an enemies to friends to lovers moment, right? So congrats to you and Ace in Heartshackle. Oh yeah, this was another fun one, Gothic Besties, and I have two thoughts. The first is that this is a Lilia and Cater, because Lilia is quite literally a Gothic bestie, and I think Cater is the best suited friend for Lilia to be paired up with, who would also say bestie, from the school at least. While KK tries to stay sunny, he absolutely has a secret melancholy going on that I think could fit the Gothic vibe in an adjacent way. He's certainly more complicated than I think he's given credit for, and since he and Lilia are already good friends, I can see them being shipped together. The other thought is that this is a Lilia Malinora ship, because these two were indeed besties, and they are both very, very Gothic. In fact, that's kind of the entire aesthetic vibe, and there was a time where Lilia did have feelings for Malinor, so there is evidence to support the ship. But because of the wording of besties, I feel like this is more specific to Cater, since he would absolutely use that word, and I think he has many times. So I'm going to say that my final answer here is Cater and Lilia, so congrats to you two. Our next name, Invisible Rose, really threw me for a loop at first, because I could not think of who the Invisible could possibly be. The rose obviously is a reference to Riddle, but I couldn't think of his non-visible counterpart for an embarrassingly long time. So rather than have you sit here through my hemming and hawing, I'm just going to let you know that I think Chenya is the best of it here. Chenya likes to drop by unannounced while also invisible, so he can startle other folks and get a kick out of that. And since Riddle and Chenya would have known each other for a while and still to this day maintain a cordial relationship, I think choosing them for this ship makes sense. So congratulations, Chenya and Riddle. Last but not least is Underwater Fire, which I thought was a delightful mix of words that gives me absolutely no context whatsoever. Yet I still have a pretty solid idea of the individuals involved, somehow. Fire, I think, is a reference to Riddle, since he's kind of the fire guy of Twisted Wonderland, and Underwater has to reference one of the mermen. It just has to. I don't see how it could reference anyone else. Maybe Kaleem with his Oasis Maker, but I feel like that's a stretch. So I feel like since this is such a practical descriptor that gets down to business right away, it's gotta connect to Azul, right? This is such a no-nonsense ship name that I can't help but think it's the product of a businessman's love for a rule-following dork. So I'm going with Azul and Riddle here to round out the last of the ships. My, oh my, what lovely pairings we have all around. There are a couple that I think I did really well on, and some that I kind of already knew, but just what were the true intended pairings? Well, I wasn't able to find basically all of them, but I did find a couple, and that was Applejacks, which is indeed Apple and Jack, go me. Florida, which I couldn't find specifically, but I found Florid, which is Floyd and Riddle. So I'm just gonna say that Florida is also Floyd and Riddle. Applejuice is in fact Apple and Deuce, and Heartshackle is Ace, Deuce, and you, and I think it can be either romantic or platonic, or it's just kind of the name for that trio. I'm still a little unsure. And those were literally the only ones that I could find via Google and Instagram and other platforms that I was trying to search for these on. So, I am going to rely on the rest of y'all to tell me what these are if you know, or just give me your best guess. That's also quite fun. Just let me know what your thoughts are. And I'd love to know if any of them were or are one of your faves. Let me know all of that down below, and if you liked this video and want more content like it in the future, let me know that too, with a like or a comment or maybe even a subscribe. And as always, before you go, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.